I was slicing pot roast at my own kitchen counter when my son started talking about the house like I was already halfway out of it. He did not say anything dramatic. That would have been easier to answer. He just stood by the refrigerator in his good Sunday shirt, holding a sweating glass of iced tea, and said to his wife, "Once we get things organized here, it'll be a lot easier on everybody." Here meant my house. I kept slicing. The knife went through the meat clean, and the carrots gave that soft little push they always did when they were done right. I had the yellow Pyrex dish on the stove warming the green beans, and the dinner rolls were wrapped in a towel the way Helen used to do it. Outside the kitchen window, the dogwood along the fence line still had some green left in it, though October had started turning the maple in front orange at the edges. The Browns game was on low in the den, where my grandson Tyler had already dropped onto the couch with his plate balanced on one knee. My daughter Emily was setting out paper napkins because she said the cloth ones made her nervous around red gravy. Daniel's wife Cara had brought a store-bought apple pie in one of those clear plastic domes, and Megan, their girl, was standing by the sink twisting one of those braided bracelets teenagers wear now. Sunday supper had been ours for years. Even after the kids were grown and out of the house, they still drifted back often enough that the routine stuck. Pot roast when the weather cooled, chicken and noodles when somebody was sick, ham at Easter, burgers out back when July got hot enough to make the kitchen feel mean. It had been Helen's rule that no one needed a reason to come home on Sunday, and for most of our marriage, people didn't. They just came. Since she died last February, I had kept doing it because I did not know what else to do with Sunday. That is something people do not tell you about being a widower at my age. They say they are sorry. They bring casseroles. They tell you to call if you need anything. What they do not tell you is how loud a house gets around the things that stop happening. The second coffee cup. The television murmuring in a room you are not in. Someone calling your name because they cannot remember where they set the scissors. After a while, you start doing old routines, not because they make you feel better, but because the silence feels too proud if you let it have its way. So I kept Sunday supper. Daniel came in carrying a bag of ice from the gas station, and before he even set it down, he had started talking about getting things organized. Not in a hard tone. Worse than that. In the tone people use when they think they are the only grown one left in the room. I moved the roast to the platter and said, "You can put that in the freezer drawer if it'll still fit." "I got it," he said. He said it fast, the way a man answers when what he means is, "I know more about kitchens than you do now." He walked over, opened the freezer, shuffled things around, and closed it with a little extra force. Then he looked around the room the way appraisers do. I knew that look. I spent 32 years as a building inspector for Fairfield County, and you learn what people show on their faces when they think in terms of use instead of living. Square footage, access, deferred maintenance, problems to solve. This was still the ranch house Helen and I bought in 1987 when the subdivision was new enough the maples were no bigger than broom handles. 3 bedrooms, 1 long living room, attached garage, linoleum. We always meant to change in the laundry room and never did. The mortgage was gone. The roof was only 6 years old. I had rebuilt the back deck myself after the old one started to rot near the steps. There was nothing fancy about the place, but it was ours in the old full way of that word. Not bank hours, not paper hours, ours in the way your hand knows where the light switch is in the dark. Daniel turned and said, "You still got that leak under the hall sink fixed?" "Been fixed." "You sure?" I looked at him. "I'm the one who fixed it." He smiled, then not mean exactly. "Just flat." "Right." Emily glanced up from the napkins and said, "Can I bring anything else in from the dining room?" "Just the rolls," I said. She nodded too quickly. Emily had gotten into the habit of moving the air around Daniel when he got like this, as if peace were a tablecloth she could smooth with both hands. She was 41 and still had some of Helen in her face when she frowned, especially around the mouth. But Helen would have let a silence stand when it needed to. Emily rushed in to fill them. Cara came in behind Daniel and kissed my cheek. "Smells good, Walt." "Thank you. You didn't have to do all this. I know I didn't." That made Megan smile a little. She and I got along all right. 16 quiet watchfuls smarter than she let on. She helped me carry dishes without clattering them, didn't spend the whole evening staring at her phone. Ever since Helen passed, she had gotten more careful around me, which I appreciated, even if I didn't always know what to do with it. We sat down a few minutes later. I took my usual seat at the head of the table, more out of geometry than authority. Daniel sat to my right, Emily across from me, Kara by the casserole dish. Tyler drifted in late and sat near the den so he could hear the television. Megan took the end seat closest to the kitchen. For a few minutes it was ordinary enough to fool a man. Plates passing, ice clinking in glasses. Kara talking about a PTO fundraiser at the middle school. Emily asking Tyler whether he'd heard back from Cincinnati yet about the warehouse job. The roast came out good. Soft, but not falling apart. Helen used to say pot roast should still remember it used to be meat. Then Daniel asked me whether I had thought any more about simplifying some things. I kept chewing. What things? He shrugged one shoulder. Just practical stuff. The house, bills, keeping up with everything. I'm keeping up with everything. Sure, he said and reached for more potatoes. I'm just saying it wouldn't hurt to think ahead a little. There it was again. Not argument, positioning. Emily cut in with Dad's done fine. Daniel nodded like a man indulging a child. I didn't say he wasn't doing fine. No one said Helen's name, but I felt her absence so hard. Right then it might as well have been another body in the room. If she had been there, Daniel would not have used that tone. Or, if he had, she would have looked at him over her glasses and asked him what exactly he thought he was doing in her kitchen. I set my fork down. If you've got a point, Daniel, make it plain. He gave a little laugh and looked around the table like I was proving him right by being touchy. There doesn't have to be a point. We're talking, Kara said. He's just worried about you, Walt. That word worried has done a lot of dirty work in families. I looked at my son. You worried I can't pay my electric bill? That's not what I said. You worried I don't know where the checkbook is? Dad, you worried I don't know my own house? Tyler looked up from his plate. Emily stopped with her glass halfway to her mouth. Even the game in the other room seemed louder for a second. Daniel leaned back in his chair, put both palms up and gave the patient smile people use on strangers in waiting rooms. Dad's useless with money now. We all know that. Ever since Mom passed anything beyond groceries and the cable bill turns into a production. He said it lightly. That was the cruelty of it, not as a punch thrown across the table, as a fact already agreed on, as if the room had signed something I had missed. Nobody gasped. Nobody told him to shut up. Emily just lowered her glass carefully onto the placemat. Kara stared at the pie dome like the bakery label had suddenly become interesting. Tyler looked down at his potatoes with the embarrassed stillness of a young man hoping adulthood would happen somewhere else. Megan froze with her fingers around her bracelet. I heard the refrigerator hum. A car passed outside. Someone in the den yelled from the television after a bad call. I said, "That's so." Daniel sighed, and now he sounded tired on top of everything else. Don't make it into more than it is. I'm trying to help you think clearly. In my own house? Dad, come on. No, I said. You come on. Emily finally spoke soft and thin. Maybe we should just eat. Daniel shook his head once, like he was the one being tested. This is what I mean. Nobody can say anything practical without him taking it personal. Him. Not Dad, now. I looked at the plate in front of me and saw Helen's old brown gravy boat near my hand, the one with the tiny chip on the handle from 1998, when Daniel knocked it against the faucet, helping with dishes after Thanksgiving. He was 20 then, home from Ohio State, broad-shouldered, loud, still open in the face. Helen had laughed and told him if that was the worst thing he ever broke in this house, we'd all be blessed. I had almost forgotten that memory until that minute. Maybe that was the part that hurt most. How quickly a room can take a man out of the center of his own life while he's still sitting there. Kara said, "No one's trying to upset you." Daniel pushed his chair back an inch. There are just some papers I've been looking at. Some options. Nothing is happening tomorrow. My eyes went to him then. What papers? He reached for his tea. I said options. Across the table, Megan looked up before she could stop herself. Then, in the small, honest voice of somebody who has just realized the adults are lying in different directions, she asked, why would Grandpa have to sign anything? Daniel answered too fast. It's nothing, Meg. But she was already looking at him now, not at me. Teenagers know when adults start changing the shape of a sentence. Kara reached over and touched Megan's wrist, like that could smooth the words back down into the tablecloth. Emily said, maybe this really isn't the night. That was what ended supper. Not the insult, not my son saying I was useless with money in my own kitchen. Just Emily's thin little peacemaker voice trying to move us all toward our dessert, as if apple pie had ever once solved a thing worth naming. I stood up and took my plate to the sink. The room loosened right away once I moved. That was its own kind of lesson. Chairs scraped. Tyler slipped back into the den. Kara started talking too brightly about whether anyone wanted coffee. Daniel said Dad in that warning tone children get by accident from their own parents, and I kept walking. At the sink, I ran water over the plate longer than I needed to. Out the window, the yard light had come on over the back steps, throwing a pale circle over the deck boards. Helen used to say that light made the yard look like the start of a confession. We had stood out there one summer night 20 years ago after Daniel came home from college, talking big about opening something of his own. Someday. Maybe a supply company. Maybe equipment rental. Maybe contracting. He had ideas like sparks back then. Helen leaned against the rail with her iced tea and said, "He's got your confidence and my appetite for trouble." I had laughed. She hadn't. "You'll keep saving him from himself if he lets you," she told me. "He's 20. He won't stay 20. I remembered that now, with my hands in greasy water and my son behind me in the next room, talking low to his wife like I might still be part of the conversation if they kept their voices level enough. The pie came out. Coffee was made. Nobody asked me to carve anything else. That was new too, though not new enough. Since Helen died, people had begun helping in ways that rearranged a room. Someone else carried the serving dishes before I could. Someone answered the door while I was halfway there. Daniel had taken to saying things like, "Let me handle that" when bills came up or insurance letters showed in the mail stack. I had let more of it pass than I should have, because grief makes you tired in places sleep does not touch. It is easier sometimes to let a thing slide than to make a whole evening out of correcting it. That was my mistake. Not the first one, probably, not the last, but the one I could see. I dried my hands and went back to the table. The pie had been cut. My slice was already on a plate waiting for me where I'd been sitting as if I were a guest who had stepped away from his seat. "Thanks," I said. Emily looked at me then and quickly looked down again. Daniel was on his phone. Kara was asking Tyler whether he needed more whipped topping. Megan was staring at the side of her glass. I sat. Daniel did not raise the subject again. That bothered me more than if he had. A man who says something ugly and then moves on like the room will do the rest for him is counting on everybody's hunger for peace more than he's counting on being right. When they left, it was near 8. Kara took the extra pie. Tyler forgot his ball cap and came back in for it. Emily hugged me a little too long in the foyer, her cheek cold from the outside air. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm standing here, aren't I?" She gave a tight little smile that belonged more to childhood than now. Daniel didn't mean I looked at her. She stopped. That was something at least. Emily tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "He's under a lot of pressure. The business hasn't been great. I think he gets in a mode." "What mode is that?" She sighed. "The one where he thinks if he says something like it's already decided, people will stop making him explain it." There was more truth in that than she probably intended. "What papers was he talking about?" I asked. Emily's eyes moved past me into the kitchen. I don't know exactly. Emily. She rubbed her fingertips together the way she did when she was nervous. Helen used to tap her hand and tell her she'd wear her fingerprints off before 40. I know he's been looking at financing options. For the shop, he mentioned restructuring some things. With my house? I don't know that. Megan does. Emily shut her eyes for a second. That landed where it needed to. Dad, she said quietly. I heard him say something last week when I dropped off those freezer meals. He was on the phone in the driveway. He said, once I get him comfortable with it, the collateral side gets cleaner. I didn't know what he meant. I told myself I didn't know. There are moments when your body takes in a fact before your mind agrees to it. My chest did something old and unpleasant, like stepping off a curb you forgot was there. And you let it go. She nodded once. Shame came into her face in little pieces. I didn't want to make something out of half a sentence. That was the family disease right there. We did not call things early. We waited until a pattern had furniture in it. I opened the front door for her. The porch light caught the silver in my own reflection in the storm glass. For a second, I saw my father there instead of me. He died at 63, still strong enough to throw hay bales, but tired in the eyes by then. He used to say that old age did not arrive all at once. It arrived first in the way younger people began reaching for things that were still in your hands. Emily kissed my cheek and walked out to her car. I locked up after everyone left and stood in the kitchen a long time without moving much. The dishwasher hummed. The pie smell was still in the air. Helen's recipe box sat on the counter where I kept it now, mostly because her handwriting did better in the light than in the drawer. I opened it and found the pot roast card, the one with the grease mark in the corner, and the little note she had added after Daniel turned 13, double the carrots he eats them if they're soft. I laughed once through my nose. Not because anything was funny. Then I thought about the first week after the funeral when Daniel came over every evening. Took out the trash, changed a porch bulb, checked the smoke detector batteries without being asked. One night he stood at that same counter and said, "You don't have to worry about all this by yourself anymore, Dad." At the time it had sounded like love. Now standing there with Helen's handwriting under my hand, I heard the sentence again and could not tell where love had ended and claim had begun. I slept badly. Woke at 3:30, then again at 5:10. By 6, I was in the driveway in my robe getting the paper. The air had gone sharp overnight. Somebody down the street started a pickup and the engine coughed 3 times before turning over. I brought the paper in, made coffee, and sat at the table with the local section open in front of me without reading a word. At 8:20, Megan texted me. That in itself was unusual. She mostly sent pictures of the dog when she visited or answered when I asked how school was. "Are you home this afternoon?" I looked at the message a long moment before answering. Yes. She sent back, "Okay." No emoji, no extra sentence, just that. At 9:15, Daniel called. I let it ring once more than necessary before picking up. "Morning," he said, too hearty. "Morning. You got a minute? I've got several." He ignored that. "About last night, I think things got sideways." "Did they?" "I was trying to talk practical, and you took it like I was insulting you." "You were insulting me?" A pause. Then that patient exhale again. I could picture him rubbing a hand over his jaw, staring out the windshield of his truck like he was the one carrying the harder burden. "Okay. Maybe I said it wrong. Maybe. There's no need to make this bigger than it is." That sentence again. That family solvent. Pour enough of it on anything and soon the table's clean, the stain's gone, the truth can't hold shape. "What is it then?" I asked. He cleared his throat. "Linda Carver's going to stop by around 4. Just to walk through a few options. Nothing binding." I thought it might actually make you feel better hearing it from somebody neutral. I said nothing. "Dad, you invited a banker to my house." "It's not like that." "What's it like?" "It's a conversation." "About what?" "A beat too long. Then, some ways to simplify things. Protect the property. Give everybody a clearer path. Everybody. There it was. He still talked about my house like it was a future event with chairs around it. I didn't ask for that. No, but you haven't exactly been making decisions either. I felt something inside me settle then. Not calm, harder than calm. The way wet concrete stops taking footprints. I make decisions every day, I said. Dad, you know what I mean. I do, I said. That's the problem. He started to talk again, but I was done giving him room to arrange me with his voice. What time did you say? 4. All right. I hung up. At 10:30, Megan came by in Daniel's old Subaru, the one that burned a little oil. She stood on the porch with both backpack straps in her fists, looking like she might bolt. Your dad know you're here? I asked. She nodded, then shook her head, then gave up and said, He thinks I'm at Kelsey's. I stepped aside and let her in. She did not sit right away. She stood by the kitchen table looking at the recipe box, the coffee mug in the sink, the folded newspaper. A child knows when a room has been bruised. I'm not trying to cause trouble, she said. That usually means trouble's already here. That got the smallest smile out of her. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a manila folder. Not thick, maybe 15-20 pages. My name was typed on a sticky note at the top in Daniel's blocky hand. He left this on the counter this morning, she said. I think he meant to bring it later. I did not touch it yet. What is it? I opened it. Her voice dropped. I know I shouldn't have. Go on. There's stuff about the house in there. Numbers, equity, loan structure, and your name on a line with signature tabs. My tongue went dry. You read all of it, not all. Enough. She looked sick now, and angry in the way only decent people get angry, like they would rather be wrong. He told Mom last week you'd come around once somebody explained it the right way. That did it. Not because I had proof now, though maybe I did. Not because a child had carried me a folder she should never have had to touch. It was the phrase, come around, like I was a piece of weather, like agreement was only a matter of managing me long enough. I put my hand flat on the folder at last. The paper was warm from her backpack. At 3:52, Linda Carver's sedan pulled into the driveway. Megan was still in the kitchen. I had not told her to go. I had not told her to stay. I heard the car door close, saw the shape of a woman in a navy coat through the side light by the front door. Then Daniel's truck turned in behind her right on time, as if they had planned the order of arrival too. A few seconds later, there was a knock. I opened the door. Linda Carver stood there holding a leather portfolio against her chest. Daniel was coming up the walk with his practiced expression already in place. Mr. Mercer, Linda said. Thank you for seeing me. I looked at Daniel once, then stepped back and let them in. She reached the kitchen table, set the portfolio down, and drew out the papers in neat square alignment. Daniel stayed standing for a second, maybe expecting to take the lead. Instead, Linda looked straight at me. Then she placed the packet on the table and said, Mr. Mercer, before we go any further, I need your approval on this. I looked at the packet and did not touch it right away. Linda stood with both hands resting lightly on the table, professional enough not to seem nervous, but careful now. Daniel had stopped halfway between the doorway and the table. He had that same look men get when they still think a room can be steered if nobody says the hard thing too plainly. Megan stayed by the counter. She had gone pale, but she did not leave. Approval for what I said. Linda glanced once at Daniel, then back at me. For any loan structure involving this property as collateral support. Property, not home, not house. Property, that was honest at least. Daniel stepped in then. Dad, that sounds a lot bigger than it is. I pulled out my chair and sat down. Then it should be easy to explain. He gave a short laugh meant to make the whole thing feel ordinary. That's all this is. Explanation. No, I said. The explanation should have come before the packet. That landed. Not hard, but clean. Linda lowered herself into the chair opposite me without being invited, which was all right. She knew by then she had walked into something already underway. Daniel stayed standing another second too long, then sat at the side of the table where Helen used to put the serving bowl of green beans. That hit me in a place I did not care for. I put my hand on the top page and slid it toward me. There it was, in black and white. My address, market estimate, equity position, proposed structure. Signature tabs clipped at the bottom. A page of figures and percentages that all came down to one simple thing: my son had already imagined a future where my house stood up under his business trouble like an old mule under somebody else's load. I turned one page, then another. Linda said in the careful tone of a person who would rather not be caught in family weather, "For the record, Mr. Mercer, nothing can move without your consent." Daniel indicated there had been preliminary family discussion. "Did he?" I said. Daniel leaned forward. "There was. We've talked about simplifying things, about not leaving you buried under all this stuff." I looked up at him. "You mean my stuff?" "Dad?" "No," I said. "Say it plain. You mean my house?" Kara was not there to soften him. Emily was not there to translate. It was just the table, the pages, my granddaughter standing still as a coat hook by the counter, and the woman from the bank who had already figured out what kind of room she was in. Daniel rubbed a hand across his chin. "You're acting like I'm trying to rob you." I turned another page. "What do you call bringing a banker into my kitchen with my signature tabs already marked?" His voice sharpened. "I call it trying to keep this family from getting caught flat-footed." "What family?" He blinked. I tapped the packet. "This is your loan problem. Not Emily's, not Megan's, mine least of all." Linda slid one page slightly closer to herself. To be fair, Daniel did present this as a possible way to consolidate pressure from the shop expansion. I let that sit there. Shop expansion. That was a better phrase than trouble, but not by much. Daniel saw the shift in the room and tried to get in front of it. "It's temporary. I told you that. Short-term leverage, clean repayment path, everybody protected." I looked at him for a long moment. "You called me useless with money less than 24 hours ago." "That was not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant." I kept my voice even. That was the part he hated most. Anger he could work with. Calm made him reach. He sat back and exhaled through his nose. "You haven't been the same since Mom died." There it was, not even dressed up now. For 1 second the room went thin around the edges. I saw Helen in the kitchen window over the sink, not as a ghost or anything foolish like that, just as memory arriving on time. She had stood right there in a red sweater one November afternoon, drying plates and listening to Daniel complain about a supplier who wanted money up front before delivery. He was 32, then already married, already irritated by limits. Helen had told him, "Your father's caution is the reason this family still has anything worth arguing over." Daniel had laughed it off. I had laughed too, because sons forgive correction more easily when it comes wrapped in a mother's voice. Now there was no mother's voice. Just mine. "You're right," I said. Daniel looked startled, like he had expected resistance, not agreement. "I haven't been the same since your mother died." I folded my hands over the packet. "The house hasn't been the same. Sundays haven't been the same. Coffee in the morning hasn't been the same. But grief and stupidity are not the same thing, Daniel." Megan drew in a breath through her nose. Linda's face did not move at all. Daniel's own expression tightened. "Nobody said you were stupid. You brought a packet into my kitchen based on the idea that if people talked slowly enough around me, I'd hand over my house. It is not your whole house at issue." I gave a short laugh then. I could not help it. That may be the dumbest sentence I've heard in this room. He looked at Linda, maybe hoping she would rescue the language for him. She did not. I lifted the packet by the corner. "Did you tell her I was likely to cooperate?" Daniel said nothing. Did you tell her that? I said you'd be open to discussion. Were you there when I opened this folder this morning, I asked. His eyes flicked once toward Megan. Just once, but that was enough. Something in her face hardened. I saw it happen. Linda cleared her throat gently. Mr. Mercer, I can withdraw the file now if you prefer. No, I said. Stay. Daniel leaned forward. Dad, this is getting dramatic. No, I said again. What's dramatic is using your mother's death as a weather report. What's dramatic is deciding I'm easier to move now because she isn't here to stand in the kitchen and ask you what the hell you're doing. The words hung there. That was the line, I think. Not because I raised my voice. I didn't, but because everyone in that room knew it was true, and truth changes the temperature when it arrives with the right name on it. Daniel's face went red up under the eyes. That's not fair. I looked at him. Fair. I thought about him at 12, sitting at this same table with his arithmetic homework spread out furious because long division wouldn't come. Helen sat beside him in one of my old sweatshirts, tapping the eraser end of the pencil against the margin while I washed dishes. The answer doesn't become fairer because you pout at it, she told him. It's still the answer. She had been gone 8 months, and I had still not moved that sentence out of my head. I said, what's not fair is that I buried my wife and then had to sit here while my own son translated my grief into permission. He opened his mouth. Shut it. Opened it again. Linda reached for the packet. Mr. Mercer, unless you are expressly interested in preceding my recommendation, is that we terminate this discussion. I turned the top page over, then placed the whole thing flat on the table between my palms. I am not approving anything I said. Not this structure. Not any structure that puts this house under your business. Not next week. Not after somebody explains it slower. Not when I'm more comfortable. No. Daniel pushed his chair back half an inch. So that's it. You're just going to let me drown. There was the final turn. Not concern, not family planning. Just the naked request at the bottom of all his careful language. I nodded once. You are 44 years old. His jaw worked. I raised you, I said. I fed you in this house. Your mother did more for you in this kitchen than you'll know until you're too old to pay her back. I helped you when help was help. What I will not do is fund my own removal, so you can call it practicality. Megan spoke then so quietly I nearly missed it. You told Mom Grandpa would come around. Daniel turned toward her. Megan. No, she said, and her voice shook but held. You did. He stared at her, like he had forgotten she was old enough to hear things and keep them. That was the end of him, really. Not as my son. A man doesn't stop being that because one day goes bad. But as the voice in the room that everyone else arranged themselves around. Once a child says the plain thing, the furniture of a lie starts to look cheap. Linda gathered the packet in tidy motions, tapping the edges against the table. I'll mark the file declined, she said, and I'll note that any prior assumption of informal alignment was mistaken. Mistaken. She was being kind. More kind than the moment required. Daniel stood up too fast. Fine. I did not answer. He looked at me like he wanted one last argument, one last chance to make me louder than him, uglier than him, older than him. I gave him none. At the doorway he said, You're making this harder than it needed to be. I said, No. I'm making it impossible. That was the last line anybody needed. He went out without slamming the door, which somehow felt more angry than if he had. Linda followed, pausing only long enough to say, I'm sorry for the misunderstanding, Mr. Mercer. It wasn't yours, I told her. When she left, the house went still in layers. First the engine sounds in the driveway, then the click of the gate at the side yard, then nothing but the refrigerator hum and the vent ticking warm air through the floor grate by the hall. Megan was still standing there. You should call your mother, I said. She nodded. Her eyes were wet now, but she had held them until it was over. That, too, reminded me of Helen. Before she left, She came around the table and put her hand over mine for 1 second. Not a hug, not a speech, just a hand. After she drove away, I locked the front door and turned off the porch light. The kitchen looked smaller without everybody in it, but not emptier, just honest. It was full dark outside. The yellow lamp over the table threw a warm circle across the wood grain where the finish had gone dull near my usual chair. I made fresh coffee even though it was too late for coffee. Helen used to do that after bad news, said a warm cup gave your hands something decent to do while your mind caught up. Then I took her recipe box from the counter and set it beside me. The pot roast card was still on top. Double the carrots, he eats them if they're soft. I ran my thumb over her handwriting. For months after she died, the house had felt as if it were waiting for decisions, waiting for somebody to step in, waiting for my life to become a matter for discussion in softer voices than mine. That night it didn't. That night, with the yellow light on, and Helen's recipe box open and the kitchen finally quiet in the right way, the house felt like a place again. Not an arrangement, not a future asset, not something being prepared for my absence. Just home. And for the first time since I buried my wife, I sat there in the stillness and felt that nobody was taking it from me while I was still alive to notice.